Good morning, everybody. I wonder how your week has been. What small delights have you discovered this week? Our life should be full of small delights. One of my own small delights is watching the birds on the feeder outside my kitchen window. I can sit at the table with my cup of tea and while away the time just watching. It's relatively sheltered, hung in among the honeysuckle, protected by the wall and the oil tank. So it provides a degree of shelter for the birds from the elements and from other things. Because another of my small delights are the two cats who visit my garden on a frequent basis. Well, apart from when they are trampling or doing worse to my vegetable seedlings, or, you've guessed it, trying to catch the birds on the feeder, then they're not quite so welcome. I know that is their natural instinct, but when it comes to a choice between saving a bird or the cat having a meal, well, the bird wins. It's not that I don't care for all creatures, I do. But when a well-fed domestic animal is seeking to harm something when that something doesn't have the same advantages and protection that does, then I'm afraid the one in need of my help gets it, and the cats get squirted with a water pistol or hissed at if I'm nearby. All lives matter, but for the sake of fairness, sometimes we have to focus on one particular life or type of life. And on my bird feeder, it tends to be the birds. Black Lives Matter. I wonder how many of you winced at me saying that, or nodded in agreement, or said in reply, all lives matter. All lives do matter. But in this current time and place, Black Lives Matter. God is not only aware of all the sparrows falling to the ground, He's aware of each individual one, just as with my birds on the feeder. Here in the northeast of Scotland, particularly in Upper Deeside, we live in communities that are predominantly white. If you are white up here, it is expected that you will have no faith or be a Christian, even if nominally. We'll save the debate as to whether you can be a nominal Christian for another day. And it can be difficult in this context to see the relevance of the Black Lives Matter protests and rallies. Some of you may even wonder about why I'm speaking about a political matter in a Christian sermon. White people are people of privilege, most of it unseen and unspoken. White heterosexual men over the age of 30 or so, even more than younger white men, and more so than white women, or those who identify as transsexual, bisexual, lesbian, or homosexual. Evidence shows that the more you add in other discriminators, the more your voice is silenced. So a poor black Muslim transsexual female under the age of 30 will find it far more difficult to be heard than a rich white Christian heterosexual man over the age of 40. It shouldn't be that way. All of our voices should be equally important, but it is. So as a white female in a professional role in my 40s, my voice has some power. Not as much as a white married man would have in the same role, let me just point this out. But I have power. How am I going to choose to use it? You have power. How are you going to choose to use that? I wonder how many of you feed the birds in your gardens. How many of them try to protect them from other animals who, let's face it, have just as much right to be there as the birds. In the Gospel reading from Matthew today are the very, very uncomfortable words from Jesus. He says, I have not come to bring peace, but the sword. Pacifists, look away now. Too often our Christian history has referred to Christ as the Prince of Peace, and we have forgotten that to bring about true peace, not just peace for us, but peace for all, we have first to swing a sword. Anyone uncomfortable yet? It doesn't make me comfortable. But peace for just one race and one nation for one skin colour, for one section of society is not peace. That's favouritism at best and a breeding ground of superiority or hatred for others at worst. As Christians, we have a duty to wield the sword. We have to swing the sword of the Spirit. It's a sword of justice, of mercy, a sword which should cut through the prejudices, excuses, and unacknowledged biases in our own lives and in our systems. We have to swing the sword of truth, that it may shower sparks into the darkness of our world. The sword has to cut through those things that hold people, including ourselves, captive. That's what swords do. It has to cut through the bonds of poverty, of inequality, the bonds of working a minimum wage, of being more susceptible through your background, race, gender, or circumstance to disease or illness. And those bonds, all of those bonds, are accompanied by the bonds of indifference, of inactivity, of silence. You may or may not be poor. You may or may not have experienced inequality or hatred because of who you are, because of what you do, or where you live. But if you have not reached out to help those who are experiencing it, you are as much bound by their race or gender or sexuality as they are. What are we doing to bring about peace? Not just peace for us, but peace for all. The thing about swinging a sword is that it will inevitably cut things down, wielded correctly or not. We have to be careful how we wield it, but we must wield it. Swords are a weapon of an individual. Have you ever noticed that? Jesus does not say, let's send the army in or the police in. He doesn't say, let's rage against the institution. He makes a very personal choice. It's a choice we have to make. Do we rage against the institution, castigate those elected for the jobs we perceive them to have done badly, petition for this action or that action, or do we pick up the sword ourselves? There's nothing wrong with raging or castigating or petitioning, but to be effective, it must also lead to action. We must raise our voices and our swords. Swords always make me think of medieval battlefields, but I'm aware they're still in use today in some places of war. And there are battlefields and graveyards throughout the world where people were killed by swords. A lot of them you can visit. Often there are memorials to the fallen or monuments to the great and famous. I do not say great and good. They are monuments to people who were good and to those who were bad. But most were somewhere in between. Products of their times with both sides, like us. We celebrate the good in those people, but we should not ignore the rest of the story. We need to remember the bad as well. We should not seek to eradicate it, for from both good and bad, there are lessons to be learnt for all. As a Christian, I believe that I am called to care for all, to help bring about equality, justice, and mercy. The fact is that God cares for us, cherishes us, loves us all equally. When one of his children, is struggling or hurt or in pain, when they are facing injustice or lack of mercy or lack of intolerance, he notices. When we are having a hard time, God pays attention. He notices the sparrows. And then he picks up the sword to protect us all, to fight for us all. We are the hands of Christ on this earth. To act as he would do, I have to pick up the sword in defense and protection of those who have not the same privilege that I have. I have that privilege I have also that duty. But most of all, I hope I have that love. I am beloved of God, one of his precious children, as are you, as are all. Christ has no body now but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes through which he looks compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands through which he blesses all the world. Yours are the hands, yours are the feet, yours are the eyes, you are his body. Christ has no body now on earth but yours. Amen.